All right, everyone. So there's a lot of different topics running in the strategy tools community. We have corporate strategy, we have startups and scale-ups, we have innovation clusters, and increasingly we have business angels and venture capital. Now, for many years, I have sort of kept my eyes on Switzerland. I've met many great and smart people in Switzerland. And I've really seen a lot of parallels between what the Swiss are doing and what the Norwegians are doing, and also what other parts of sort of emerging Europe is doing. Now, one of the people that I have had a chance to learn the most from, and Thomas, you don't know this, but I follow everything you do online, is Thomas Dübendorfer. Thomas used to be an academic of sorts. He joined Google for about 8 years. Fortunately for us, he left Google. He became a co-founder, very successful. He became an early investor. And then he basically co-founded I would say, Thomas, the largest Swiss angel network. So I think many people on this call, whether you're based in Latin America or in Asia or in Europe, could actually follow Thomas's footsteps in terms of building the angel network and the angel ecosystem in your region. Thomas, you just brought a new book out, so we're going to turn the floor over to you, because I strongly recommend everyone to learn from Thomas and read his book. Thomas, thank you for joining.
Thanks for these kind words. Let me just share the presentation. Now you should see my presentation, right?
Yep.
Yes, as you heard, basically I started as a computer scientist in academia, but then decided to go to Silicon Valley to work there a little bit. And after finishing my PhD on cybersecurity, I joined Google, and now basically I'm an angel investor. So yes, interesting journey. Now I want to share some stories about how Switzerland looks like as an ecosystem. As a business angel, I see a lot of deal flow, more than 200 new startups that want to get funded, which have a technology product. They come every year to our investors, and we try to connect them with those which are the best fit. Now, not sure if you know how large Switzerland is, about 8 million inhabitants, but we have a big diversity of different startups in our ecosystem. Now, if I switch to the next slide, some people ask, yeah, are there any unicorns there? Because some people are totally fond of them. So they basically look at the success of an ecosystem by counting the unicorns. And funny enough, I also didn't know how many we have, because Switzerland is not the country that does a lot of PR about money itself, or about big success stories, and also not about unicorns. But there are lots of them. As you see on this slide, you found 27 unicorns, which are startups that have reached a valuation of $1 billion somewhere along the journey. And interestingly, if you look at what type of startups it is, about half of them are in health tech or in life science. And the rest is, to big majority, actually in technology, mostly software-driven startups. And you see more and more that were born in recent years. They were most of them were in tech. So Switzerland has been a life science health tech country for a long time, but now it has shifted and it's also become an interesting country for software startups. By the way, if you want the slides, I guess Christian can share them afterwards to send in the link. So totally free to use them for your purposes if you find them useful. Now, this is Switzerland, and we have like 3 major clusters. One is around Zurich, where I live. Yes, any questions? No, was maybe just another audio glitch. All fine. So basically, we have 3 major clusters, one around Zurich, which is definitely the largest city we have. It's not the capital. Actually, Switzerland doesn't have a capital. We have like a main city, it's called Bern, but in our legislation, there's nothing like a capital. But most people say Bern is the capital, because that is what comes closest to a capital. Now, the economic center is definitely Zurich and not Bern, because it's much larger, about 400,000 inhabitants. The greater Zurich area is about 1 million inhabitants, and it extends also in neighboring cantons, for example, Zug, where we have Crypto Valley. A lot of crypto startups emerge from there. And then we have the cluster around Basel with a lot of pharma and life science startups. And then we have a cluster in the western part of Switzerland, which is French-speaking, around Lausanne and Geneva. They have, for example, a cluster around security startups, which is growing quite rapidly. And many of these big clusters already had unicorns in the past, but we also have other universities all over Switzerland. So just if you look at these three clusters, you'd only find some very interesting deal flow. About half of the startups are from the greater Zurich region. Now, it's not just these 27 unicorns which already are known, it's actually many more in the pipeline. So we looked at fast-growing companies which already have reached valuations between $200 million and $800 million. And we found more than 33 of them, which have the potential in the next 2 to 5 years actually to become unicorns. And that's quite good if you compare it like to Germany. Germany is 10 times bigger than Switzerland, but only is about 3 times the startups basically in the soonicorn phase, the soon-to-be unicorn phase. And if you look at other countries like Austria, one of our neighbors, there are only about 5 of them have currently this potential. Now, what's the valuation of all startups combined that we have looked at, not just the unicorns, but the startups that have emerged from the ecosystem of Switzerland. And until end of 2021, the combined valuation of all the startups was about 148 billion. That's basically the UBS, Credit Suisse, and Swiss Re together. It's like 3 major companies on the stock exchange which have been there for decades. This is what the ecosystem in startups has produced in the last 30 years. So it definitely comes into a region where it's to be taken more serious. And you see also how the value add was. If you look at the colors, like what happened after 2015 is in red, and that's a big significant part of the value add. So you see basically it's accelerating a lot. And in recent years, especially as you have seen, there were many more unicorns and the valuations also went up a lot of the startup ecosystem. So it's definitely a good development that things are growing and getting more significant. Now, they also raised quite a large amount of funding. This is how much money was raised every year since 2010 for Swiss startups. Most of that money actually comes from abroad, not from within Switzerland. So most of our startups have to go abroad to find growth money, as you will see in some later slides also. So while in 2010, we had a tiny financing ecosystem, about $200 million came into startups. Now it's at 2.8 billion. And you also see that it's significant at this level already since 2017. There we had an outlier. Roivant was one startup which got more than $1 billion in the funding round. That's quite an outlier, I would say, because it's like almost doubled what would have happened in that year otherwise. But good to see is that basically we could keep it at more than 2 billion since the last 3 years. And we also expect that this will continue in the current year. Yeah, that's definitely interesting to see these statistics. Everything seems to be growing. Now, if you look at how much money is invested divided per capita, per inhabitant, basically, then you see that Switzerland is about on the same level as the funding per person as like UK and Ireland with $1,500 per capita. And total VC funding combined since 2015, if you calculate it together, you see also here it's about comparable to Sweden and Netherlands, but not at all comparable to UK, which is a much higher activity than Switzerland. Also partially because there the state is extremely active in giving, for example, tax reliefs for investors, or also having other incentive schemes for founders, which, for example, Switzerland doesn't really have. Like you cannot deduct anything from the taxes in Switzerland if you invest, if you live in Zurich. There's 2 tiny cantons which have it, Ticino and Jura, but they're so tiny that they don't really matter. But all the big ones which would matter, they don't have any tax incentive schemes here yet. So also this seems interesting for the small size of Switzerland. We seem to be playing in an interesting league here. Now, how much money comes from inside of Switzerland if you want to raise money? That's the dark red part, domestic. And you see this is quite small. In the year which has just passed was about 14% only. And it never was more than 30% in the last like 6-7 years. And that's a really tiny fraction. It also means that startups mostly raise the first few rounds, like the seed, maybe Series A from within Switzerland, and then most of the rest they have to get from abroad. Mostly from Europe, as you can see, about 35% comes from Europe, another 28% from USA. then 13% from Asia, and another 10% from the rest of the world or from unknown sources. And I'm not sure how this is in Norway, if you can do the growth rounds yourself, most likely not, but I didn't look at the statistics. Now, this is the split by the rounds that they do. So if they raise between 1 and 15 million on the very left, you see about 30 to 40% comes from within Switzerland. If they need more than 15 million in the middle, between 15 and 50, it decreases a lot. And if it's more than 50 million, basically it's almost no chance to find the money here, with some very few outliers, mostly in life science, where some family offices invest really large tickets, but not like in software startups normally. So yeah, you see how this has changed, but basically since a very long time, yeah, people had to go abroad to find growth financing. This was already the case when we built the Gotthard, the largest tunnel that we have. Also then most of the money came actually from Berlin, from Germany, and not from Switzerland. So it seems that this hasn't changed in a couple of years here. Okay, now, if you don't know about the ecosystem, don't know where to start, you want to know what's specific for Switzerland. For example, we have company laws which are somewhat different from other countries. So what is the responsibility of a board member, for example, is quite different than, for example, in Germany or in US. You're much more liable here if you go into the board of a company, down to being personally liable. If you screw up and don't pay the taxes, in the end, you could pay it yourself privately. Even so, the company basically screwed up, but because the board is considered here to be ultimately liable for all financing decisions, the board is even more liable than the CEO here. And that's the thing you need to know. If you join the board as an investor, normally the guy with most of the money gets to pay first, and then he can try to get the money from the others in the board. And so if you're an investor and go into a board, you're most exposed, of course. But it's also good because people take it much more serious when they are in the board, that they really make sure they have the right data, they can take decisions timely, and they do not just let it slip. And also to make sure that they are aware of the taxes that are coming up, maybe even get the ruling in some cases where you're not sure how much the taxation will be. And that's a very nice thing of Switzerland. You can actually get the ruling to tell, the tax authorities will tell you in advance how much you will be taxed when you do certain things before you do them. So you basically have a private conversation with the tax authorities, and then they basically write it down, and then you sign it from both sides, and then it's valid for the next 5 years. And that's a quite unique thing, that you can basically negotiate certain taxation things directly with the authorities. That would be impossible in Germany, I heard. I'm not sure how you can do that in Norway, but it's definitely useful to learn how much it would cost before you do certain expensive transactions like an exit or some incentive programs for employees. Yeah, of course, we also have a lot of tips about how to do due diligence, how to be a great coach, what type of deal terms you should put in to get some minority protection. And the book itself is completely for free. You can download it online as a PDF, review it as a flip book. Just go to the website, angelhandbook.ch. We also printed some of them, about 5,000. We already shipped 4,500 in the first 3 months, so might need to reprint some of them. And so it seems a lot of people, they're really waiting for like a handbook on get a fast start. So most people read that in 2 days, and then they know most of the interesting and things you need to watch out for before you invest in a Swiss startup. Now, Switzerland has a diverse support community for all the startups here. All these many logos are organizations within Switzerland that support Swiss startups. Most of them support them for free or almost for free. Some of them are state-sponsored, others have some other initiatives behind, some have foundations behind them, or others, they have a program, the first part is free, and then if you want to get more, then it's paid. But there's a lot of support from coaching to winning some awards, whether it's more PR or more money. Then you have a lot of incubation and acceleration programs, a lot of information platforms, tons of events and networking opportunities. If you are at the university, most of them have a technology transfer office. They even pay you a patent if you want to get the patent before you do incorporation of a startup. They help you with patent research, which also they pay, or they also help you do like a first prototype with some first funding in some cases. There's a lot of support. The bad thing is just most people don't know because it's very fragmented. So now we put this map on SICTIC.ch/map, and there you can click on every logo and jump to the website of these organizations and learn more about them. Also, when I started to be an angel, I know about 20 of them, and by now it's more than 200. And this is the first time they're all on one map, and some people found it quite useful to have this overview. So the map is also available, and if people find more, they will tell us. It's a collaborative effort to keep this on a good up-to-date level. Now, what is the Angel Club that I'm a co-founder of and also the president? It's called SICTIC, or Swiss ICT Investor Club. It's by far the largest investor club, more than 3 times larger than the next Angel Club in size. But we're also the youngest, which is quite surprising. Others are like 20 years or older in the ecosystem, but somehow they didn't really grow anymore. They didn't catch on the tech wave. They didn't have a clear focus as we do. They didn't do enough education maybe of angels. And we invest a lot in having really excellent deal flow and a very thriving community of people which have an entrepreneur mindset. And we also have the highest minimum investment ticket size. So we expect people to invest 20,000 Swiss francs or more. It's roughly $20,000. Other clubs have between 2,000 and 10,000 per deal. And even though a lot of people told us it wouldn't work to have a higher investment minimum ticket, it was actually one of the distinguishing factors that startups came to us first, because with us you have less investors and more money faster than with the others where we need a lot of small tickets, and then you have to handle 50 investors and you're just 2 founders. And then you have so many more investors on the deal than founders and employees. And sometimes it gets difficult if it's not aligned. And we have offices in 3 places, in Zurich, then in Ticino, in the Italian-speaking part, and in Lausanne, DPFL, where it's French-speaking. So we cover all of Switzerland with the club. Now, if you look at the member base, we started to have the first investors in October 2015, which was me. And then all my friends joined. At the end of the year, we were 24. And then lots of other people joined that were in our network. So we added about 80 new investors every year since then. And this is the last number we have published, more than 400 investors end of 2020. And we could keep the level and even grow a little bit. Also, in terms of investment rounds, on the right side, you see last year we had 80 rounds in total. Out of this, we had 3 exits from the portfolio, 16 fallen rounds, and 64 first-time investments. And also, just in the year which just passed, we haven't published the number, but it's about the same level of activity than 2020. So we could also keep the activity level here. And so we're still growing, not maybe as fast as before, but we're still growing significantly. We want to grow in quality, not in quantity. We had a lot of investors that wanted to join, which we did not accept because we didn't think that they have the right mindset. If someone tells us they want to get rich very quick with angel investing, I don't think it's the right investment because you cannot get in and out like at a stock market. Here it's a long-term commitment. And so we always check people before they enter the club to make sure they understand what they engage with. And just to sum this up, what type of startups we have from a technology point of view, about 20% are fintech. Then we have quite some hardware startups. For example, 3D printing we've seen, or some gadgets or VR stuff in hardware. Then startups which do communication or artificial intelligence, machine learning, a lot of platforms, travel technology startups, e-commerce, Healthtech, virtual reality and augmented reality applications, cybersecurity, down to legal tech. So we have a little bit of everything. It's really diverse. So you find not just fintech here, we find lots of other cool stuff. Most of it is business to business. So they sell to companies, about 2/3 or more. Is business to business startups. Then we also have some business to consumer startups and very few which are like peer to peer or selling directly through other partners in a B2B2C model. And yeah, this is basically it. Yeah, so if you're interested, you can check it out. Our events are accessible online. You don't need to be physically here. If you just want to attend an event, you can always contact us. We normally give some free tickets for people we think they have a good profile. If you want to go straight to an event, you can also just buy a ticket, of course. But in the end, we don't want to push anyone into anything. Should be the right mindset and should be a good fit. And yeah, if you want to get the handbook as a PDF, then you can go to angelhandbook.ch. And that's it. Any questions?
Thomas, I want to ask you two questions. The first question is, what would be your recommendation for others in Mexico, in Panama, in other countries that would like to, do what you did? You started with yourself, you got your friends, and then you built it. Well, what's the recommendation?
I mean, we helped to bootstrap 2 other clubs, one in South Africa and one in Liechtenstein. And if you want to be successful as an angel club, I think the most important thing is to have the right group of investors at the very beginning in the seed. You need to have really credible, authentic people that actually do not just talk about investing, but that also invest. Best thing is if some of them also understand what it means to be a startup founder. The best is, of course, if you had a former founder who had an exit and then becomes an investor, because these people know the whole journey and they're extremely credible in the scene. So try to get them people either as investors or as advisors very early on, so people think that you really know what you do. And it also gives you a great network into the deal flow if you already have people which have been active in the startup scene. You should not start just with people that talk about investing and never would invest themselves. Especially the one that represents the club should be an investor, him or herself. Otherwise, it's really tricky. I've seen it with other clubs. They have managers. They hire them as a manager, but they never invest themselves. And then people don't believe that they know what to talk about. And it takes much longer to convince people to join.
And final question, Thomas. I mean, you've been in this ecosystem now for a long time. What do you think? What has been the biggest policies or government changes that has been helpful or to drive the ecosystem?
I mean, we tried to change a few things for startups. One problem in Switzerland is the wealth tax, which you might not have in Norway, I think. It's quite unique to very few countries. And then the problem is if you get the high valuation very early on, you have to pay a lot of taxes as a founder or as a shareholder. And there we could now set a new type of rule that in the first 5 years, basically, they don't tax you at the valuation that investors pay, they tax you at the actual money that you have in the bank. It's called the substance value. That's normally very low for early stage startups, but it can still become a problem like in the year 6 and later. Other than that, there haven't been a lot of policy changes actually around startups recently, but there are a few of them now on the way because now we are at the size and activity level that we also have some politicians which are interested. And for especially around employee incentive programs, we want to make it much more attractive to give out real shares and not just phantom shares. And there's some really good things on the way, and we really hope that these will be implemented.
Nice, super. Thomas, I said in the opening that I always learn from following you, whether it's on LinkedIn or listening to you here. So really thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing. And for everyone, get the book, use it in your own ecosystem. Every context and legal framework is going to be a little bit different, but it's one of the most solid books that I've come across for angel investors. So highly recommended.
Thanks. You're all welcome. And I wish you all great success if you start to invest or if you become a startup founder, whatever, or a startup coach. I mean, all of it can be fun.
Well said. All of it can be fun. I totally agree. Thank you, Thomas. Super.